Okay, so this is just a quick tutorial on how to load and use the programs in the new sample pack. So I'm using Windows and Ableton Live for this, but all of the principles will be exactly the same whether you're using Mac or any other DAW. If you know how to load a VST and you know how to navigate your Explorer, then you'll be absolutely fine for this. So in this video, we'll cover loading VST, Sforzando. We'll look at where to find programs, loading a program. We'll go through each tab in Sforzando. We'll look at playing a program and then wiping the program once we're done with it. We'll look at program specific controls, and then we can look at assigning MIDI CC controls to those, and then we'll just have a bit of additional extra information just at the end. So we'll start by loading Ableton, and we'll need a new MIDI channel here. This is just my microphone channel for the purposes of recording this video. So we'll arm that. We'll look down our plugins list and we'll go down to Plug. We'll look at Sforzando and load via whatever means your DAW loads VSTs. So this comes up with quite a simple box here. One of the reasons I like it, there's no sort of distracting interface. It's just very simple. So now that we've got this loaded, we'll go back to the desktop where I've got the folder containing all of the sample project instruments. So we'll look at something relatively simple to begin with. We'll look at just a bass synth. So we'll go to digital synthesizers, the FM collection, and down to the FM 127. We'll take the Halcyon bass. So here you'll see that all of the WAV samples are contained within this folder, along with a SFZ file. Now this was created in a notation software, so you can open this and look at the code, but we'll cover that just in a bit. All of the WAV samples within this pack are either 32-bit and 48 kilohertz, or if they're sustained samples, they're 24-bit and 48 kilohertz. So, okay, so we'll go back to Ableton now. Just move this over here, and all it takes is to just drag and drop onto this interface, and this will load the patch. So we can play it in one of two ways. So we can audition it quite simply just by pressing the keyboard here, and that works across the entire range. Alternatively, you can play it on your MIDI keyboard. Okay, so we'll now look at some of the tabs here in Sforzando. So this is the info pane. You'll notice that this displays the sample and the file location as well. So this will change when you press these keys. This one's a little bit long, so you don't see the key being played on the end. We've got the controls tab. So for this program, it's relatively simple. You just got a basic release envelope. Sometimes that's all you need on these patches. We've also got velocity tracking as well. So for many of the synths that I sampled, the original didn't include any kind of velocity function, which means that it didn't matter how hard you press the key, you still get the same volume output from that note. Just as a bit of a addition, I've added velocity tracking into these patches in the code, and so you can control that by using this. So on 100%, it's just as the original, and as you pull this down, it will become more sensitive to the velocity. We've got an effects tab. Now these aren't written into the code, this just comes in Sforzando. So in order to send this, you increase this. Okay, the effects are good, but bear in mind that Sforzando only has one output, so you can't send a dry and wet signal out of Sforzando. So in most cases, you're better off using a send and return channel within the DAW. Although for playing live, these are perfectly functionable. And finally, we've got a settings tab here. So this has your RAM allocation, which on some of the patches are, if you've got the spare RAM, crank it up. On the American Analog patch, there's 6.5 hours of samples that load simultaneously for that patch. So you may find yourself sort of putting up to sort of 4 or 8 gig in some cases. You can also increase the pre-caching, which makes a big difference as well. You've got some detailed sort of diagnostic information here as well, which is good. Shows you the sample rate, and also here it shows you the number of samples in this particular pack. Okay, so once we're done with this, see now, one of the things with this is that if you change these values and then load another patch, then sometimes these values stay the same. So whenever you're done with a patch in Sforzando, it's a good idea to go up here where you see the name of the patch that's loaded, and you just click empty. That completely wipes the program. And if we go back here now and load a different program, this will load up with the preset values of that program. So I've tried to tailor the preset values to kind of suit the program where I can. Obviously this is just a matter of taste, so feel free to mess with those. Okay, so we'll empty this now. We'll look at a more complicated program, more complex program. We'll go back to analog synthesizers. We'll look at the 6-voice poly. Okay, we'll drag and drop that. It loads up on a very thin blue bar at the top there. Okay, so now you can see that we've got a full 4-point amp envelope. We've got filter with a 4-point filter envelope, filter LFOs, pitch LFO. We've got some extra options here as well, including unison detune, sub oscillator, noise oscillator as well. So notice that we can use these. To shape the sound as if we had the actual synthesizer there in front of us. Obviously these patches are all made using samples of the original synthesizers, and where possible I've tried to recreate as many of the controls on the original as possible. So this actually mirrors, apart from some extras that I kind of added in there, these mirror many of the controls on the original synth. you notice that I just turned the volume up there ever so slightly. Now, this is one thing that I need to mention. With these filters, these are digital. They are very, very mathematically perfect. They're really great filters, but one thing is that we're in the digital world here, and if you've got really high resonance on certain cutoff values, it's going to peak. I've set the volume at what is a reasonable level for these patches if you're just playing them. If you start cranking the resonance on some of these filters, I really advise that you turn it down here. Okay, don't be tempted to just turn it down on the fader or put a limiter or compressor on it, because the output of the program will still be peaking here. And if it's peaking here, it doesn't matter how far you turn the fader down, it's still going to be peaking. This is especially noticeable on, again, something like the American Analog patch, which has got a 24 decibel 4-pole filter. Yeah, I mean, it does peak on some settings, and that's not the program. That's just the output volume. So you might find yourself lowering this quite significantly here in order to deal with that. But the overall volume should stay the same on those more extreme filter settings. Okay, so now we can look at actually opening the SFZ program itself and looking at some of the assignable MIDI CC controls, because all of these can be mapped to your keyboard controller, just with just inputting the number on your controller that matches with these. So there's two ways to open the SFZ program. So you either click here, double click and open. Now this won't open without you first right clicking and going to open with. You'll need to assign a notation software to open these. They are all created in notation, but they're then saved with a .sfz suffix, which means that it won't open unless you've told your computer to use a notation software to open that. The other way to open the program is open in text editor here, which is really useful. The great thing with SFZ is if I make a change here now, type over this and change that label and click save, it is instantly changed on here. Okay. Now you can see the CC values down this list here. So for example, if we just drag this over so you can see both. Okay, so MIDI CC 109 is cut off. So cut off's here. So all you do is assign your MIDI keyboard controller, whichever controller you'd like to assign to this function, to CC 109, and then you can control the cutoff on a knob or a fader that's on your keyboard controller. Same for resonance, etc. All the way down. Whichever of these controls you think you'd like to have sort of hands-on control over, you can assign. So just very quickly, I'll just scroll down here. I've tried to label this code sort of so that you can see which parts of the code are affecting the behavior of which part of the samples. So for example, again, sorry, I'll just move this over. So here we've got amp envelope. So you can see that this is assigned to MIDI CC 105. You can then go back up here and see, right, MIDI CC 105 amp attack here. So you can change some of these settings to suit your own programs, and create your own presets as well by saying, well, maybe on this preset I want a longer decay, so I can put over a 6 or a 3 and then save that into a new program, and when I load up that program it will auto load with that different value. So we've got amp envelope, filter section, filter envelope, LFO, high pass filter, pitch LFO, the Hoover setting, which needs a bit of work at the moment, but it's in there for now. A little bit of EQ on it, and then we've got the samples themselves. So you'll see that here is region 1, and that tells C1 to play the sample 6 voice poly C1. So if we go back here and we go into our samples, then we've got 6 voice poly C1. So that tells this here, tells this program to play that sample. Okay, so that's it. There's a bit of extra stuff now. So in these folders you'll see a README. This has got some information on the patches that are contained within. So I've tried to put information about the synth or sampler or whatever it was that the sounds came from. And there's certain things, like for example with the harmonium patch. So it's got some information in here, and it tells you in more detail some of the controls of the patches. So for example, on the harmonium patch, you'll see, and reload, so you'll see key noises. So this might not be immediately apparent as to what that means. When I was sampling the harmonium, I noticed that I could hear the keys clicking back into place when I took my finger off the key. So I've sampled those sounds and put them on this controller, so you can have you can raise or lower the volume of those sort of natural sort of key noises, hopefully to make the program a bit more realistic. If it gets annoying, you can turn it all the way down, or if you want some kind of extreme effect, you can turn it all the way up. Some of the synthesizers that I programmed are incredibly noisy. The FM9 in particular just has this huge amount of hiss and noise that comes out of the digital to analog converters on it. So what I noticed was that when you were playing a note, you could hear this hiss, and when you stopped playing a note, it died away. It just sounded really, really unnatural. So I sampled the hiss, put it on a loop, and you'll be able to hear, if I just pick one of these programs very quickly. So we're back in digital FM again. Okay, let's try and find one here that's, oh, beg your pardon, that's me. Okay, so we've got hiss level here, so you can hear the hiss. Now, if you're wondering when you're listening to your track back where that hiss is coming from, it's gonna be that. Okay, so it's just worth me mentioning at this point, because if it gets annoying, that's where it is. Okay, but obviously, like I say, without it, the entire program just sounded really, really unnatural. It's triggered when you lift your finger off the key, and it's muted again when you play the next note. So there shouldn't be any kind of volume stacking. It shouldn't play the same sample on top of itself over and over again and cause a loud hissing noise. It should just be a background sort of texture as it sounds like when you play the original. It's going for realism. Okay, so other than that, that's about it. There's some pictures in each of these, or there will be on release. Maybe just one other thing I might explain is what a round robin is, because that's again not immediately obvious. So for example, on the glockenspiel patch, you've got round robin 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you hit a glockenspiel in particular, it doesn't sound the same every time you hit it. You get you get sort of like muted tones, different harmonics when you hit the bars. So instead of just doing one pass over the glockenspiel, I did 4, and then these are all set on a sort of random trigger basis. So when you hit the key, it will make a sound, but it will select a random choice from one of those 4 sounds. So hopefully, rather than just sort of, you know, sounding uniform as you're playing that patch, it will make different noises. Now, I don't know how successful this will be, but I'll try and demonstrate. So it's quite subtle, the effect, but it just hopefully makes it a bit more real. I'll just look finally at that American Analog patch. Again, there's kind of weird stuff in a lot of this. In the cassette tape grand piano, for example. Again, you've got tape hiss here because this is from a tape. You've also got the sound of the tape starting, and then play, and then you can stop the tape. So just little things like that, hopefully, that make the experience a bit more interesting. Okay, so we've got the American Analog here. It's worth just having a look at how these waveforms are selected. We've got all of the 512 possible waveform combinations on this synth, exactly the same as the original. Okay, so all of these are in the README, so you've got the values here. I've tried to put those across there. In these patches, these programs, it was a lot more complicated to fit all this stuff in. So rather than just one program here, you'll see that this includes other programs as well. So these are then in these sub-programs. So we've got, for example, Oscillator 1, and Oscillator 1 will include all those possible combinations of the waveforms. Just before we leave, I'll just tell you, have got drum samples here as well. These aren't keyboard map, they're just one-hits, one-shot samples. So we've got various analog, we've got some 12-bit sample drums as well, so they're in there. And before launch, we'll also be adding some impulse response reverbs as well. So okay, thanks ever so much. Cheers.